In this chapter, we're going to discuss bow hand grip. Now, if we take Dave's hand as an example here, the way I like to look at this is I split the hand up into two halves using the lifeline, which runs down here. This side is the thumb side, and this side we're going to call the heel side. Now, it's really important that only the thumb side makes contact with the grip and the heel side doesn't. Basically speaking, these two sections are different muscle groups. If we're going to have two muscle groups acting on the grip, it's going to cause uneven pressures in the grip, which are going to create torque issues later. So it's really important, as I say, to make sure that only the muscle groups in the thumb side are making contact. So now, if Dave relaxes his hand like this, okay, you can see that that's a nice relaxed hand, and that's basically what we're looking for throughout the shot, to keep the hand relaxed and just have it as an extension of our arm. If Dave now turns that over and puts it in the 45-degree position, so the knuckles are actually running down at 45 degrees, yeah? And that is exactly how we're going to put it into the bow. So now we've described the parts of the hand, it's time to show you how to put it into the bow. If Dave takes that nice relaxed hand that we talked about before and puts it into the bow using a low wrist action, he's then going to put even pressure down the grip. This means that, again, Dave is actually going to rely on his skeletal system of his hand and his wrist to rely upon instead of muscle. And this refers back to how we talked about it before, that skeletal system is much stronger than the muscle system. This is quite simply an extension of his upper body position that we talked about before. So now if we take a look at how Dave's got this hand in the grip, he's actually got his thumb and first finger looped around the front of the grip, and they're sitting there nicely relaxed. They're also protected by the finger sling, which, as Dave's hand is relaxed, this will catch the bow once he's shot it. You'll also notice that these three fingers here on Dave's bow are tucked in behind. Now this acts as a guard for the grip, because we know that if these sections of the fingers are touching the grip at any point, then the grip is incorrect. We can actually see in here that Dave's lifeline is running to this side of the grip. Therefore, that is correct, because only the thumb side is touching. Another element to consider when we're discussing grip is actually that the forearm doesn't get in the path of the string. Now we can see here, when Dave draws up, when he draws correctly and his knuckles are at 45 degrees and the correct side of the hand is into the grip, you can actually see that his forearm is well out of the path of the string. However, we can see that when Dave's grip is incorrect and he has both sides of his hand on the grip, that the forearm is then in the path of the string. This is going to cause you to hit your arm, and it could affect arrow flight, and it's also going to affect the tune of the bow massively, so it's not a good idea.
Now that we've kind of touched on how we want to put our hand in the grip, Liam, I'd like to talk to everybody a little bit about grip construction and so forth. For us, the narrower grip works the best, really, because the narrower a surface is, the less prone to torque it is. The closer to the pivot point, which is the center of the grip, you can put your hand. Now, I've seen a lot of things out there on a lot of grips. I've seen skid tape or rubber athletic tape and big wooden gummy grips. Anytime you add something to the surface of your grip that changes the texture of it, that adds more adhesion abilities, the possibility for torque is even greater. Because if you've got skid tape or some kind of other athletic tape on your grip, you put your hand in there slightly incorrect from one time to the next, it's not going to have the ability to slide or slip to the point of least resistance. So it's going to grab that handle and it's going to torque and twist it. And when you get torque and twist in a bow grip, it's not only going to affect your shot, but it's also going to affect your accuracy. It's going to affect your tune and your arrow flight too. A lot of problems in tuning when you are encountered from how a person holds the bow, but also what kind of grip's on their bow. So I think the stickier it is and the wider it is, it's got to go. The grip's got to be nice and narrow and a smooth surface that's going to allow torque to come out of it. In this next section, what we're going to talk about is we're going to get into release hand posturing and positioning, how you should hold the release, and what you should do with your thumb when you climb into the release aid. Now, with Liam acting as a model, Liam's going to walk us through proper release hand posturing and position, how the release should sit in your hand.
So firstly, I'd like to take the hand, and I believe that the release needs to sit across this second pad here. So I make them like that and simply fit the release in like this. Now when I do that, it's really important to keep a flat back of the hand. So all the way from the elbow, all the way across to those knuckles there should be a perfect flat line. And once again, this is relying on skeletal structure rather than muscle structure, as we've spoken about earlier, because it's much more reliable. We're not relying on any muscles, we're relying on the skeleton to keep this solid.
For me, when I think about release hand position, when I put my hand in there, I kind of, to illustrate it to some of the people watching the video, I think about it a little bit back in my recurve days when I used to shoot a recurve. And I had my tab, you know, with its ledge, and it was really important to keep those fingers nice and straight and that wrist joint straight back to the elbow. So I almost think of it as I've wrapped my fingers around the bowstring, I'm in my tab, and I just turn my hand over. And I've got these two knuckles split, and that's eventually where my anchor is going to end up. But that's another way that helps me kind of illustrate it in my mind, how my hand should go into the release aid.
And finally, when you're actually thinking about your thumb position, which is what we use to execute the release aid, which is what we'll cover later, myself and Dave both like to literally just lay before the first pad and the knuckle there is exactly where the trigger meets. And that's where we just lay it on, we keep a nice relaxed thumb, and we absorb the weight of the trigger in our thumb, and then it's ready to execute the shot from there.
And I think one important thing to keep in mind with this is the deeper you go in your release aid, the further it's going to bring your thumb up on there. And when you go deep in the release aid and you bring your thumb up on there, it puts a bend in this joint here. And as we mentioned before, when you incorporate a bend in a joint, you're not using your body's natural skeletal structure. You have muscles on either side of that bend. You need to maintain specific tension on all the way through that shot and from one shot to the next to have any measurable level of consistency. So I don't like to go too deep, and I don't like to be way out on the tips. Right across those middle pads, bring your thumb around, set it in a nice natural position so you've got good full contact with the trigger, and that should yield you a really good release aid position to begin your execution with.